and thank you for taking this time. And so tell us about where we are right now and how you came to be here.
Well, thank you for your for that invitation, for the invitation to be here, Jeff. I really appreciate your motivations and your energy, the energy that you put into your radio show, the energy that you put into getting to know people and drawing out the character of individuals. And it's a splendid pleasure to be here with you today.
Mahalo.
I came to be here. Right now we are at Hawaiian Sanctuary. We're at my palatial yurt and lanai, which is rather humble, and I like it that way. I came to Hawaii about 9 years ago in an effort to escape the crowds of California. Central coast of California, Pismo Beach is where I'm from. I spent most of my later teenage years and adult life. And I came to Hawaii on a visiting mission. I had a friend here by the name of Jerry Grantham, who's a world famous surfboard shaper and maker. I've known him since I was about 14 years old. He moved here about 4 years before I did. And so I came on a visit, and next thing you know, owning property and just loving the place. When I arrived in Hawaii, I felt more at home here than I've ever felt any place else that I've ever been. And that was the main draw for me, is that I felt the moment that I got off the airplane, I felt at home. I can recall specifically the moment that my foot touched the tarmac at the airport in Kona and feeling like I had arrived. And that sense of wonder and that sense of welcome is with me today, 9 years later. And that's why I'm here. And that's the primary feeling for me is welcoming. And I've continued to experience amazing things literally falling in my lap as opportunities since I've arrived here in Hawaii. Big changes have happened in my life, and a lot of different things have occurred. So I'm organically flowing with all of that and accepting the change, allowing what's coming, and remaining open.
I think it's obvious that Mother Pele loves you very much.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So you're from Pismo Beach. Is that south of San Francisco?
It's south of San Francisco, about 4 hours, 4.5 hours south of San Francisco, about an hour north of Santa Barbara.
Ah, so you're south of Big Sur.
South of Big Sur by about 2 hours.
North of San Luis Obispo?
Just south of San Luis Obispo by about 15 minutes.
Okay, so it's like a distant suburb of there almost.
Yeah, and it's actually kind of a hidden gem of the central coast of California. Pismo Beach is widely known as far as a name, but there's 27 miles of open beach that extends from the Pismo Beach area south to a place called Oceano and the sand dunes where the original Cecil B. DeMille movie 10 Commandments was filmed.
Really?
Yeah, and the ruins of the original set of Babylon can still be seen in some spots out in the sand dunes.
Very interesting. Well, tell us a little bit about your background before, let's say, like your educational or other kinds of background. I think you were in the Navy for a while, weren't you?
I was in the Navy for a while. My educational background is quite simple. I was terrible in school. I had a vast imagination, and one of the things I enjoyed most about being in school was visiting with people. And of course, that's one of the things that teachers do not promote, is that you visit with everybody at school. So my grades weren't the best, but I had an intellect that supplied me and supported me in all my endeavors that were beyond the scholastic, the typical public school environment. And being in the Navy was sort of an adventure escape for me. I remember walking by the recruiter's office in Arroyo Grande one day on lunch break from school, and I saw the photograph, the romantic photograph of a sailor standing on the prow of a ship with in his dungarees and a denim shirt and the Dixie cap, the wind blowing his uniform back, and the high seas in the background. And I had adventure in my blood. and so I enlisted in the Navy and was able to go around the world on an aircraft carrier and experience some of the most amazing things that could ever have imagined in my life. Lived in Japan for a while, on and off the ship at different occasions for different cruises and so on and so forth. And my 4 years, my 3.8 years in the Navy, I think, is a novel in the waiting. So I'll be writing that up in detail sometime in the near future.
That's very interesting. What years were those?
It was 1975 till late 77.
So just after the Vietnam thing had basically wound down.
I did. I slipped in just in between the wars, and Nam had wound down while I was in boot camp, and nothing else started up before I actually got out of the Navy. So I was in during so-called peacetime.
Yes. If I was 1 year older, I might have got drafted. But
oh yeah.
The year I turned 18, it all became inactive and everything. Very interesting. But yeah, I'll look forward to reading that. And so, is that where you first started studying martial arts?
When I was in Japan, I got interested in Aikido, and I studied for approximately a year.
Yes.
And it was fantastic. I learned all sorts of things about handling my body. I was a boxer from childhood. My father put my brothers and I, my three brothers and I, through boxing training, and had natural ability with my hands to defend myself. And I realized through boxing on our squadron boxing team that I could be pretty destructive with my hands, and that actually bothered me a bit. I wasn't real comfortable with being able to damage another human being with blows, and so I got interested in Aikido as a method of protecting myself and others from harm. If I was the one that was going to be in the offensive mode, I wanted to be in an offensive mode that could also protect others from harm.
From themselves.
Yeah.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know that much about Aikido, but it's the martial art that I've been most attracted to because as I understood it, it's not so much about combative fighting, but it's more of a sort of like a dancing or a mutual blending of energies. And I asked you earlier if it was about using their energy against them, and you go like, no, you want to use their energy to try to keep them from getting hurt.
Yeah, there's a mindset that goes with true Aikido practice, and that is to flow with all the energy that comes inside my sphere of influence. So if you think of a spiral or a whirlpool, and the individual Aikido practitioner at the center of this energetic whirlpool, that, in my opinion, is the essence of Aikido. The art of Aikido is to accept someone's energy into my sphere of influence and deflect that energy in a way that releases the energy, and the individual is still under control, so that I'm not necessarily throwing someone like I would say in a judo toss or a judo throw.
Yes.
And it's not damaging in the sense as say Taekwondo strikes might be.
You snap their leg or something.
Right. Yeah. There's no hip move. There's a lot of movement, but the movement is in a spiral or in a circular nature, and the concept is to deflect the energy in a way that allows both individuals to be able to control the situation. And my want is to avoid damage or harm to anyone involved. And so I'm one of these people that likes to take the Aikido move to the point to where I'm actually following the individual to whatever subduction move or hold that I have in mind or that happens to work in that moment. So I'll follow an individual right to the ground.
You're gently helping them come to rest in a full lotus position so you can both sit and meditate for a while. But what if you created a new offshoot of Aikido where that was the goal? Like someone would attack you with their most vicious moves, and you rearrange it all so that you both end up like doing like a delicate Tai Chi thing, or better yet, harnessing that kinetic energy and turning it into something useful, like charging batteries or something.
That would be close to mastering the art of Aikido, I would say, and I have many years of practice yet before I could attend to such a high degree of results in any Aikido situation. But yeah, that would be wonderful. Actually, I'd love to be able to end up sitting face to face with someone who was an opponent of mine previously, seconds before, and end up through Aikido moves to be in lotus position, meditating face to face. That'd be absolutely beautiful.
And enjoying it.
And enjoying it.
But see, you above anyone I know the power of visualizing cool, impossible stuff. If you want it to even, I mean, not that you would actually do that, but you know, a lot of things are our minds consciously or unconsciously set predetermined limits on what we think is possible, but understanding that process and visualizing really cool, impossible things can help them happen.
Oh yeah, for sure, absolutely. And there's an interesting sort of intrinsic concept that goes along with what you're saying, and you just touched on something that is in my awareness 24/7. Even when I'm sleeping, I have this tendency to want to create outcomes. Although I'm not attached to an outcome, I don't have expectations of an outcome, I do like to pattern my experience with visual images of how best I can cooperate or collaborate with other human beings and the planet and the environment. And that's a great visual to carry in any kind of altercation situation that I might get into. The other piece of that is, though, that the mindset, once I carry this mindset of thoughtfulness and of grace and of compassion for individuals, that mindset permeates everything that surrounds me. And the more love that I have in my heart, the stronger that mindset is broadcast in the vicinity of my body. So I feel like if I do come in contact with someone who might have previously been potentially an opponent in an altercation of some kind, the mindset precedes my physical presence, so that an individual is calmed and realizes that I'm not a threat before any altercation could ever even come about.
I know exactly what you're talking about. It's kind of like the resonance of your aura, or something like that. I've experienced a similar thing. Again, all my decades of hitchhiking all over America and all over Australia and New Zealand, this phenomenon, there was a couple of things that started happening. I realized that I had my whole system had been doing these things on their own without me being aware of it, and one of them was instantly sizing up the situation by reading every possible level of information about the person you're talking to, the vehicle you're about to get into, all their vibes, smells, movements, every different thing, the tone of their voice. You've got to make a split second, well, you've got about 30 seconds to make a decision. So I realized that I was actually doing all these a large number of computations along that line. And another one was exactly what you're saying, that I felt like people always were amazed that I hitchhiked 150,000 miles all over the States, even starting when people thought you couldn't do it anymore, and everybody goes like, oh, you'll get killed, you'll get robbed, blah, blah, blah. But nothing like that ever happened. In fact, it was very much the opposite. But I think that I have been in the presence of people a handful of times who possibly I felt the vibe that they might be kind of like thinking something that they were, but it never materialized. And I was just wondering if it might be something like the fact that my harmonious vibration blended with theirs and harmonized it, or also it not only, I'm not going to say it defused their plan, but something more subtle than that. But also the fact that if you really blend with someone, then you're like them. They see you as one of them, which that's really how I feel. And so you're again, it's like you're not the opponent; they're your friend.
Exactly.
And I think that if that would be sort of an offshoot of what you're talking about, that could be applicable to just about everybody in all walks of life at any hour of the day.
Certainly, and it doesn't extend to just other people. It extends to the environment,
absolutely,
plants, animals, all of that. And the intention that is in our presence, that's in my aura, that's in your aura, does precede the physical aspect of actually, looking at you. And so I sense your presence and your lack of threat, or the love that emanates from your heart, before I ever see you physically. Yeah.
Do you feel some love coming from my heart now?
I do.
I feel love coming from your heart.
I do. I see a great big heart right there.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
and it's got like bits of light kind of coming off of the heart.
We have to hang out more often than this.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
That is so cool. Well, so now tell me just about all the different things that you've done since you've been in Hawaii.
Wow.
Well, not everything, but just the major things.
The major things.
The major influential things, or things that have happened to you, or and sort of how you've spent your time, and then we can lead up to the main sort of projects that you have going on now.
Okay.
Again, it doesn't have to be comprehensive, but just sort of the highlights.
Sure, sure. Highlights. When I first came to Hawaii, I had a dream to create a retirement income through owning a rental property.
Yes.
And so that was the primary direction that my wife at the time and I went in. We purchased a residential property and remodeled it and began a vacation rental business there, and it was quite successful. The challenges that come with being a landlord were things that we were getting used to, and so it took a while, and that required some change also.
You might need some martial arts being a landlord.
Yeah, martial arts are definitely effective, and the ability to forecast my aura in a peaceful way is very important as being a landlord.
What was that property here or over in Kona? Or?
It was here on this side in Hawaiian Beaches, just down the mountain from here near the ocean. Beautiful, beautiful home that we fell in love with and purchased, and the challenges began to surface in the way of what I was really doing with my life in Hawaii. So things that happened in my marriage were largely due to the changes that happened inside me, and how I became more of who I am through this process of thinking that I wanted to do the retirement income situation from a rental and so on and so forth, until I realized that that whole scenario didn't fit with who I really am. But we held on to it. We had an opportunity to change our lives in just a bit, and in a way, and we looked at buying a local organic farm. So moved there and decided to operate the farm, or co-operate the farm with the owners, just to see if the business was something that I could resonate with, that she could resonate with, and it seemed to work. But somewhere along the line, the owners decided that they couldn't sell; they were too emotionally attached to the property, and so we weren't able to go through with the purchase of the farm. However, in that process, I learned so much more about the culture of Hawaii, the plants that grow here, how much of my own food can come from the local, just the yard around my home. And living in California, going to grocery stores and restaurants, I never had a real concept of being able to supply 100% of my own food. And so living on that farm and operating that farm really generated a whole new mindset and perspective for me. So that's where a lot of things started changing for me living here in Hawaii, as I got to know some people who were living in a very alternative way. Tarpentry, just tarp structures with outdoor kitchens and composting toilets, and not much more than that really to support their lifestyle, other than trees, fruit trees, and plants all around them that they use for food each day, catching rainwater to use for drinking after filtering, as well as bathing, everything else that you use water for. And the idea of living simply in the jungle actually became more of a reality for me. So that was a big shift in my psychology, or my perception of how I exist in the world and in the realm. And so at that point, I started developing more in-depth ideas about who I really am, and in who I can be, how I can actually satisfy who I really am. And I got to know some amazing people. Clive Cheatham was one of the influential people that I met early in 2007, and got involved with his nonprofit, AMA. I was specifically excited about the canoe project that he had in mind, and so that was what really drew me in. And so I got to know Clive, and of course he's one of these guys in the Puna area that just knows everyone and has a real connection, really strong connection, grounded connection with the earth and the Aina here.
It'd be nice to meet him.
Yeah, great guy to meet for sure. Very, very influential and knowledgeable. So those changes happened for me, and as I grew into this new perspective of myself, started getting more and more distant from my wife at the time, and eventually that marriage ended about a year ago, and through that, I was able to realize who I really am. But the part of that process began with also getting involved in the Mankind Project back in 2011.
Now, did you create that?
I did not create the Mankind Project. It was created by 3 individuals, a psychologist, I believe one of them was an ex-Marine officer, and the other guy was a consultant of some kind in business. And these guys over breakfast one morning or on a napkin somewhere wrote down this concept of how they wanted to put together a project or a program to help men become more of themselves in life. And so when I got involved, I went through the New Warrior Training Adventure Weekend here in Hawaii on the Big Island, and it literally changed how I see myself when I look in the mirror each morning. And that was a very strong influence in me becoming more of who I believe I am. And I believe that's evolving more every day. So the Navy was sort of a beginning for that. I got to know myself a bit more there, came to Hawaii, and coming off of everything that I had done in the aerospace industry for 20-some years, being a trainer and so on and so forth, and then arriving here in Hawaii and realizing that a lot of that stuff is superfluous as long as I've got the basics around me. Hawaii supplied that. Here in Puna, this is literally a breadbasket for the state. There's food that grows here. You can literally drop a banana tree sapling on the ground and come back a year later and collect bananas from that tree. It just lays there on the ground and grows. It's so amazing. So that whole the entire idea of surviving related to thriving really became apparent to me, that it's easy to thrive in an environment that provides food and water that literally falls out of the sky and off the trees.
Yes.
And then the people, another huge piece of what happens here.
May I just go back for 1 second? Tell us just briefly about the kind of training that you did with the people in the aerospace industry. Was this like a psychological, motivational work or something like that?
Yeah, well, interesting that you would ask. It actually began as me working for about 18 years as a technician. First with aircraft in the Navy, worked as a plane captain on the flight deck of USS Midway for a while, and got to know that environment, which is a very volatile and dangerous environment. However, learned what it's all about to be able to repair a structure of a fighter jet, work on the engines of the fighter jet, work in the cockpit of a fighter jet. And that prepared me for what I ended up doing after I got out of the Navy, which was working in the aerospace field, and began working with airplanes first, working with Lockheed Martin building L-1011s. I was a flight controls installer and rigger, and met some amazing people down in the Palmdale Desert of the high desert Antelope Valley of California near LA. And that launched me into then working at Vandenberg Air Force Base for another 20 years, working in the rocket industry. And I worked in the rocket industry as a technician, got specialized into rocket motors, and then I was invited to become a certification instructor. And it was interesting that the manager, one of the main administrators, the technical administrator for the training department at Lockheed Martin at the time, approached the manager that I was working for, and the manager came to me and said, you know, Bob, have you seen that requisition, that advertisement for a technical trainer position? I said, yeah, I've looked at it. He says, well, what do you think? I said, well, it's beyond me. It's above my head. It's much more than I'm capable of. And he looked a little puzzled. He looked at me and he says, well, you ought to apply for it anyway. And this is a good friend of mine, a fellow by the name of Rob Meserve, and I trusted his discernment and judgment. However, I wasn't ready to take on that kind of responsibility, so I ignored his recommendation. A couple of weeks went by and he came back, and we had a similar short conversation. He said, you really need to apply for that position. So I went ahead and applied for it. I got contacted by the technical administrator of the training department and set up an interview, and I sat with him, and he was extremely happy that I had taken the opportunity to look at that potential position for myself, and I was interested in finding out more about it. And his question to me at the end of the interview was, Bob, what would it take for you to go ahead and accept this position? And that was an interesting opportunity for me because I really didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
I was comfortable in working with the engines at the time, and rocket engines excited me. I had natural mechanical ability and aptitude, and I realized this would pull me away from that. However, he said something while I was waiting and thinking about what he asked me, and he said that you can redesign this training system to fit your needs as long as it reaches the goals that we have set for the department. And that really spurred something in my mind, and I then took that bait and said, the trainer's name was John Coffey, wonderful man, and I said, John, the only way I would take this job is if I can do it my way. And he says, well, what does that mean? I said, well, I'm going to turn things around a bit, and I really work a lot more from a personal level in working with people. So I'd like to see what I can do to fit in my personal connections in the aspect of the training environment and do things a little bit differently. And he agreed. He said, as long as we get results that are favorable, then you can do it any way you want. He basically gave me, I could write my own ticket, so to speak. So I went into the training environment and I learned very quickly how important it was to know the details beyond what I had already learned in my 18-some years of working as a technician. So I spent the first 6 months just really studying all the technical manuals and getting the details down so that I could give a good opportunity in the classroom for people to actually learn something that they might not already know. These are certification classes which are mandatory for the aerospace workers to go through, some on an annual basis, some triannual, some biannual, some every 5 years. But the bottom line is I enjoy working with people, I enjoy being in front of a room of people, and so the opportunity blended really well with who I am. So the training aspect that I changed, or that I went in with, was I created a feedback forum in every classroom. And I would begin the class by introducing the topic and then opening the class to begin sharing with me individual experiences of working within that topic out in the workplace. And it was amazing. It was amazing the results that I got once we got past all of the emotional aspects of, now I'm in the front of the room wearing a suit and tie, and people that I had been working with, specifically men, for the last 18 years or so, if I was working elbow to elbow with them, now I'm in the front of the room determining whether or not they're going to get a certification in that particular discipline. And there was some animosity that was generated because of that. And so I really got some conflicting responses in the classroom setting until I was able to help people understand that I really was there to help.
Yes.
And as an example, I would put a question out to the group. Say, for instance, we're working within a satellite environment, a clean room environment, and I would ask how someone prefers to operate or to enter the clean room and what the proper method for entering a clean room is. And a response that I would get from some of these well-seasoned aerospace workers would be sarcastic remarks, like, oh, everybody knows how to enter a clean room, Bob. Why would you ask a dumb question like that? So I would go straight to that individual, and that was my opportunity and opening to then invite them to share their most efficient methods for entering a clean room. And that's where the feedback process really began. And I carried that through to the point of actually writing down the recommendations, putting those recommendations through to engineering so that we could actually make procedural changes based on the way that these technicians actually did things as opposed to the way they were written in some of these outdated procedures and processes.
Yes. Well, if I may observe that, it seems to me that maybe that's two basic sort of processes or insights that you created and learned from that experience that you brought into the things that you're doing now. Is one, the sensitivity, the feedback between the people that you're working with, and also their involvement with their experience and that feedback in sort of constantly remodeling or re-engineering or reformulating, re-navigating the processes that you're involved in, rather than adhering to a strict fixed code in any situation or project. Is to be flexibility and to realize, to be creative in doing things slightly differently and better all the time.
Yeah, it was constant improvement environment for me, and I found that getting just a little bit personal in a professional environment was a big help.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bob, let me...
So the ability to connect the communication aspect or the human aspect of what I was doing in the technical world really came to fruition when I was asked to facilitate communication improvement teams across the corporation, and that was amazingly successful for a couple of reasons. One is that I believe because I was able to bring that human element to the technical world, and it turned out that there was this huge need for people to be able to express themselves in a very human way in their technical environment. So being a communications improvement team facilitator and process improvement facilitator, doing workshops and communication workshops across the corporate environment was a huge boost in my own confidence to work with people, and interestingly also learned a lot more about how to communicate effectively in a group environment.
Yes, and now that we've shifted to, we were outdoors before, but now we're sort of more out in a more bush-like environment in closer proximity to plants and trees and birds and insects and stuff. Let me ask you this, and this seems to be sort of what you're doing, but the ability to use those communication skills and sensitivity and feedback and awareness that you've gleaned and honed with your work with people, and apply that consciously to yours and our larger human relationship with the non-human world of plants and animals and nature as a whole and our whole planet. And that seems very central to issues affecting our whole civilization, us at the individual and collective level now. And you're sort of doing that with your work with Hawaiian Sanctuary here, with the gardening and plants and permaculture and everything. But is this something that you're actually concentrating on, or would you be interested in doing that?
Oh, I'm absolutely thrilled with working in the biodynamic world, and there was a pivotal moment for me when I was back on the farm down at Papaya Farms Road, where I had a habit of early in the morning at about sunrise, I would do a walk through the 7-acre property just to take an assessment of the fruit that's out there and what's going on in the different segments and different areas. And I had an affinity, I was drawn to this row of tangerine trees. And I wasn't really certain what that draw was, other than I knew I liked tangerines, and the trees were beautiful because they were blossoming at some point. And one morning as I walked through the grounds with my flute, I felt compelled to sit down and just be with the tangerine trees, the tangerine row. And while I was doing that, I got into a meditation for, I don't know how long it was, maybe an hour, 45 minutes or so. But during that meditation, I became aware of movement near one of the tangerine trees. And as I observed what was going on in my peripheral vision, it sparked some of the memories that I had of reading about the experiences that people had in as far as the Findhorn Garden environment in England.
I've been there.
You've been there. That's
yes.
Fascinating. I'd love
Scotland.
to go. Love to go. Scotland, yes. So I recalled this concept of the plant devas that was expressed from the writings of Findhorn Gardens.
Yes, Dorothy McLean specifically.
Right. And I thought for a moment that I might be experiencing a visual sight of a plant deva.
Really?
And I remembered through the reading that they were very shy, these plant devas. They didn't like to make direct eye contact, but they want to be recognized. They want to feel the compassion of human beings. So I intentionally used only my peripheral vision to see this movement. And as I discerned a bit more about the movement, I realized, in fact, it was a creature of some kind, that in my peripheral vision it appeared to be sort of sticky and woody, like the arms were like the branches of a tree, the body was similar to the trunk of a tree, the head and the face was very tree-like, but there was definitely a creature there, as a being there.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you make eye contact?
I never did make, briefly made eye contact, but my mindset was broadcasting love, broadcasting appreciation, broadcasting awareness, and saying literally in my mind, I see you, I recognize you, I love you. And that was my meditation. And this plant deva, this creature, went from tree to tree and came close to being in my line of sight, but stayed just outside my line of sight. So that was the beginning of my connection to the plant world. I was absolutely thrilled at what had happened. And I told people about it later, and the first thing they asked me was, well, what sort of drugs were you on?
Exactly.
And I was on pure life at that particular moment in time. And so I was clear-minded. It was early in the morning. I was fresh from a good night's sleep, and I knew it wasn't a hallucination. So,
yes.
So that sparked my interest in biocommunication and communicating with plants. And it began to also click for me that plants communicate with me in a specific way that may not come across as actual words as much as awareness. So I found out that as I walk through different parts of the wilderness or any part of a farm, I find that there are certain plants that my attention is drawn to certain plants.
Yes.
And I realized at that point that attention was actually something that had originated with the plant calling out to me energetically.
Yes.
So I respond to that readily now.
Well, I can't tell you how cool this is, and I'm just making a footnote to tell you later. There's this very important researcher. He's an anthropologist, but sort of working with not exactly ethnobotany, but he's spent a lot of time in the Peruvian Amazon helping indigenous people get their land back. But he wrote 2 books. One is called The Cosmic Serpent, about how shamans sort of go down into the level of their DNA to communicate with other life forms. And he's actually done experiments about the information that's transferred in terms of, this is non-physical information transfer. And also his second book is called Intelligence in Nature, where he has specific chapters about exactly the kind of thing you're talking about. His name is Jeremy Narby. He's Swiss, but he's my friend on Facebook. I've been talking about doing an interview with him. He's somebody you might really like to check out and get in touch with, and possibly even get him here to do like a workshop or something.
Certainly, love to make that connection.
Yes.
Yeah.
But so that's very cool. And but yes, Findhorn. I went there in 1998. I was supposed to go with a group from New Mexico, but I'm the only person who ended up going. I'd never been to the British Isles before, and the first thing you hear is the RAF Air Force Base right next door, these giant airplanes landing. But then you realize that there really is a very powerful vibe there. And the longer I stayed, the more I really felt it. And I thought it was probably a combination of the energy of the land itself, but largely how that's been shaped and nurtured and amplified by the love. That's what Dorothy McLean and Peter and Eileen Caddy talked about, that the conscious love that they radiated to the divas and the plant community. And of course, the stories about they got plants to do unusual things like growing 8-pound cabbages and hollyhocks that were 3 times taller than normal in sand.
And they talked to the invasive beetles into relocating to a different portion of the garden so that they weren't eating the food that the people wanted, and all kinds of interesting.
They didn't want to kill anything. They just tried to ask things to do what they sort of wanted that was good for them too.
And it worked.
And I'd really like to maybe just touch on this briefly, but we could go into it more in a later interview. The human relationship with the whales and dolphins and this kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, it's obvious that there is a relationship with our environment, with the humans and our environment, how we impact our environment, how we collaborate with our environment, how we can support our environment, and vice versa. Well, and that cyclical process is something that I think the whales and dolphins learned millions of years ago. And so living in the ocean and being part of the ecosystem there, they have very little impact. In fact, what the whales and dolphins do is contribute in a beneficial and low impact way with their environment. So there's lots for us as human beings to learn from the way the whales and dolphins coexist in their environment.
And also the indigenous people of all around the world, and specifically, I would say the indigenous people of Australia. Having just been traveling in Australia and New Zealand for 13 years, I've become very familiar with I consider them to be one of, if not the oldest continuous human culture that's had a conscious relationship with the spirit of life and the forces of nature and living in harmony for possibly hundreds of thousands of years in a way that is sustainable. I don't like that word, but it is, until civilization came along and disrupted them. And I think it's part of my path, and it relates to what you're doing too, is to try to seek out and understand and appreciate and honor and nurture all life, but especially the people and the life forms that are under attack by the side effects, and also directly through aspects of industrial civilization that it's often invisible to people, but yet we all participate in it.
Sure.
And that's another really big topic too.
Oh yeah.
But I think that we keep coming back to consciousness and love, and what we each walk around with in our heart and our minds in day-to-day life, and it's so important.
Yeah, well, there's an interesting thing that you just mentioned, and that your aversion to the word sustainability or sustainable, and the idea of something being sustainable. The word sustainable became popularized by the federal government and the military.
Absolutely.
And so what I've learned through working with some of the people here in Hawaii, specifically Clive Cheatham, is that what we're really doing, what we're up to as a human species, isn't so much a sustainable process as much as a regenerative process.
Yes, that's a very important distinction. Sustainable is one of those words that's become part of the bureaucratic mind control agenda.
Well, if we think about what sustainable is, what does sustain mean?
Well,
sustain means getting to a certain level and holding that level.
Well, but there it could easily refer to stuff that's not good.
Exactly.
Sustainable development.
Sustain an attack, sustain this, sustain an injury, sustain so on and so forth.
Sustained economic growth.
Right.
All this is kind of like and again, another thing we could talk about in depth is the worldview and reality that we impose on ourselves through our choice of language.
Oh yeah.
And how we use language. We're
yeah.
using English. I was just writing the other day about how people are talking about, quote unquote, talking to dolphins, and I'm going like, but look, that's completely wrong, because I mean, humans can talk to anything, but that doesn't necessarily imply that communication is happening, or that they're even listening or aware that they want to hear your sound.
Sure.
So I go like, if a more intelligent appraisal would be, we're seeking to communicate with or mutually understand the dolphins or these fellow beings, not talk to.
Right.
Because talking is something that only people do.
Oh, and it's such a ridiculously inadequate method of communication. If you really think about what we're doing, I've heard using language, using verbal communication, compared to, if you were to see some animals in nature communicating in the way that humans do, they'd be using a series of grunts and hand gestures to relate complex concepts and ideas, and it seems absolutely ridiculous that we revert to such a primitive method of and to another human being that means something, but it might not be conveying exactly what I'm feeling inside about the topic.
Absolutely.
So what we were referring to earlier as far as the dynamic aura of an individual, I believe that's what whales and dolphins use, is this dynamic aura and the ability to communicate in very short noises, sonar sounds, that can communicate potentially volumes of information in just a short sequence of sounds.
Absolutely. It's possibly holographic. And also, a lot of people, and I've experienced this myself, that they're also highly telepathic.
Yeah.
And so, and all of this is a continuum, or a sort of a sensory and non-sensory synesthesia, a blending of all these different simultaneous channels. And it's not just something that switches off and on. It's a continuous envelope or web that we're all involved in. And I think, I wanted to just comment too, I think that the closer we are to the vibrations and the aura of nature that we're around, if everyone is attuned to that is a common vibration that connects everyone with each other too.
Yeah, there's an interesting piece of that particular subject that resonates with where I'm at, and one of the questions that I think you were asking is that we do have this intrinsic method of communicating that is in the subconscious level, that is below our radar, so to speak, as human beings, and yet we use it without realizing it's being broadcast. For instance, when I wake up in the morning, I think of bright light, cleansing light coming into my body, flowing in through my head and out through every pore in my body, cleansing my body every morning. And I give a bit of laughing, and I start my day with conscious thoughts around how I can coexist in my environment to the highest benefit of everything in my environment, the people, the plants, the environment itself. So that carries that entire idea or that mindset into the area of being able to broadcast that aura or that thoughts that we carry into everything that we do. And I thoroughly believe that because of the calamities that are going on in the world today, human beings are being more and more motivated into using the parts of the brain that have gone to sleep, the pineal gland and so on and so forth, that the third eye communication process and all these things that are happening now more out of desperation for a lot of people, because there are so many things happening that are changing and forcing the humans now to slap ourselves in the side of the head and say, what is it that I can do differently that's going to produce different results? And it's a bit tragic that humans get so habitual in our behavior that we tend to continue to do these things that can be harmful to our environment, harmful to other people.
Because we're creatures of habit.
We are creatures of habit. The brain is a patterning device, and it's constantly looking for patterns for survivability.
When you, if you do the same thing day after day, you don't have to think about it anymore.
Exactly. Well, and that's a natural tendency for the human brain.
And it's good in a way, but
it's good in a way.
But you can also become a victim of it, because people they might consciously say, "Well, I need to do things differently," but they're still sitting there doing it.
Right.
Like, how many times have you seen somebody watching TV, which I consider to be the ultimate weapon system, but they're going like, pardon my French, damn, this shit sucks, man. But 2 hours later, they're still sitting there watching it.
Still sitting there. So it's not until the leg breaks off of the chair and the guy falls out of his chair and spills his beer that he has to do something.
Yes.
Right? So I believe that's what's happening to the human race. We're being kicked in the seat of the pants and forced to wake up and awaken into this world where we understand more about how much we are interrelated through our communication, through our thoughts, and the thought cloud that contributes to the entire human concept of what communication really is.
The noosphere.
Yeah, sure. Call it God, call it the God consciousness, call it anything you want. The opportunity to connect with certain thoughts that are there and available to everyone is only the only limitations are the attenuator that I become through my own belief system that will accept these thoughts as real and then integrate those into my environment, into my existence. And I believe that there are more and more people attenuating and tuning into these beneficial thoughts all the time because of the disastrous environment that we're faced with. The chair leg has broken off, the beer is spilled, and we don't really even want to sit in that chair anymore. We don't want that beer anymore, although I love beer. That spilled beer is gone. And we're getting to a point, I'm getting to a point where I'm broadcasting this concept of reinventing how I exist each day based on my thoughts. It's more than thinking outside the box. It's forgetting there ever was a box.
With respect to what you were just saying, we've talked before. I think this is a central issue in the world of today. We've got, and you yourself have been an integral part of this and know it from the inside. The military establishment, especially like the U.S. military, but it's not inseparable from all the other stuff. It's this giant, astronomically huge system of technologies and personnel and operations and infrastructure, and so much of it it's creating a lot of ecological damage around the world. Just from its existence, not even to mention when it's actually being deployed. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about, and again, this can just be a seed that we could even do a whole interview about this, but is it possible for us to come to grips with why this even exists and why it's so big and why it's growing more and more? And is it possible for us to realize that we may not really need it anymore at all, because it's really ultimately I mean, even if it exists to defend us from enemies, it's still a fear-based thing.
Sure.
And so again, it's a paradox, because and I look at this from the perspective of the whales and dolphins, who are very much globally under attack, not only from military technologies but also from the hydrocarbon exploration industry too. Mm-hmm. And I'm not pointing fingers, because we're all a part of this. We all use the energy to different degrees, and we're all part of the system. And I think that the responsibility rests on us as a species to be aware of what we're doing. But it's sort of a dilemma, And could you see yourself helping to revisualize the purpose of why the giant military industrial complex exists in its present form?
Well, that's huge.
It's the hugest thing on the planet.
That's monstrous. And I have my own opinions about why the military exists. And yes, I agree with you that it's a fear-based complex, and that the military is also an economic complex.
Yes, that's probably the biggest factor.
The biggest driver. Wars are profitable to certain corporations. The aspect of having a healthy military involved in protecting the United States is active in a lot of different arenas as far as individuals and groups are concerned. When we look at the real threat that exists from other nations that would like to take over or eliminate what's going on in the United States, then there seems to be a valid reason for the military to exist. And I like to think that the military could exist in a very similar form, however, using an Aikido-style mindset where, and this is employed in a lot of military operations, however covert they might be. There are opportunities where there are limited engagement tactics that are used, and that's intended to observe what's going on, possibly affect the outcome of what's going on in certain geographical locations around the world, and yet not to interact in a way that's going to change what's going on unless there's a specific threat that's identified. So with the Aikido military mindset, that would be a similar activity, in that we would observe what's going on and we would do everything we could to avoid interacting in a way that would do harm in any shape or form. But then you throw into that the concept that the military is also an economic-based machine that provides a huge industrial complex with a way of supporting itself.
Are there enough zeros to describe that economy?
I don't think so. I don't think I could count that high in my entire lifetime. And supporting the economy, yes, it actually does support our economy. And in some ways, I believe the economy of the United States has actually become addicted to war.
Very good. Very good word.
Because of the compensation that happens from the industrial military complex for a particular economy, specifically in the United States.
Well, and with the declaration of the quote-unquote war on terror after 9/11,
yeah,
it's not going to end in our lifetime.
No, there's many things. Yeah,
this is like to me. I look at this. I always pull back and I go like, well, what are the implications of this for Mother Earth and all our fellow life forms? But look, let me ask you this. I've got about 5 minutes left for this interview. May we shift to some flute music?
Oh, sure.
And close this first interview with some nonverbal communications, some sharing of your beautiful flutes with the local divas that are gracing us with their presence right this very minute, and in honor of our love of music and the fact that you and Adele are going to perform tomorrow at a hospice, which is so lovely.
That's today. That's this afternoon.
Oh, today.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is so cool. But let me shut up now, and we'll get you to play a couple of flute songs if you don't mind.
Great. Love to.
Rolling.
This is a Takahashi-style bamboo flute that was made by a flute maker here in Hawaii about 10 years ago. His name is Michael Morningstar, and the flute was made specifically large to fit my hands, and it's got a wonderful resonant sound to it. So let's see what I can get out of this one. It's very difficult to play. It takes a lot of air, a lot of wind, and a really specific positioning for the air to go across this flute hole. And Michael told me that when I got this flute from him, he said that, Bob, when you finally learn how to play this flute, you will have learned how to breathe. And he was so right. So this next flute is basically a Native American Lakota style flute. It was made by a friend of mine who operated a company called Two Towers Flutes, and there's an inscription here, a carving that was done on the end of the flute. This is redwood flute turned on a lathe, and it's specifically designed to produce an E tone, and it sounds like this.
That was beautiful.